Yesterday afternoon on my way into Glenties, I saw the posters for the Jerbola circus, only to realise that that particular circus is next week. For this afternoon's matinee performance, Pat Leahy is the ringmaster. I see he has the jacket and handkerchief to match. I'll let you decide which of the rest of us play the parts of acrobats or clowns or tigers over the course of the next hour or so. In deciding, in a sense, what figures were necessary or how to get across the basic statistical outcomes of the recent local and European elections, I decided against slides and charts and instead to upset our impresario, Joe Mulholland, by doing it in Garrett's. 400,000 people bought tickets for Garrett Brooks. If you want to claim to be popular in Ireland, you have to at least get the support of 400,000 people. In the recent local elections, Fianna Fáil just proved a little bit more popular than Garrett with 430,000 votes. Fine Gael just a little more popular than Garrett at 408,000 votes. Sinn Féin at 259,000. They'll be at the Garrett scale, I suspect, by the time the next general election comes. And Labour fell back to about a third of a Garrett at 122,000 votes. And then with a combination of the micro, and the parties and the independents, you're getting in the region of a near Garrett of 350,000, 400,000 votes, depending on which groups you include among the independents and others. The headline figures for the parties are fairly straightforward. Fine Gael's brief stint as the largest party in Irish local government came to an end. They lost 105 seats and their vote share in the local elections fell by 11 percentage points. On the same day, however, they retained 4 seats in the European elections, doing spectacularly well in Ireland's south, but coming surprisingly close within, 11 or 13, 1,400 votes and holding their seat in Dublin. Fianna Fáil more than held their own in the local elections, as I've said. They gained 49 seats. And one other interesting thing that I think teased its way out in the coverage of the local and European elections is that in the exit poll, the RTE exit poll, which got most things well within the margin of error, it got the Fianna Fáil vote in the local elections dramatically wrong. And it suggests that people literally came out of their polling stations and 200 yards up the road, when asked by a pollster, about 3 or 4% of them were too embarrassed to say that they had just voted for Fianna Fáil, which suggests that there may be a similar reduction in Fianna Fáil's vote share in other opinion polls as well. There was no hiding the disastrous day it was for the Labour Party. They were down more than half. They lost 81 seats. They're left with 51 in the local elections, and they lost all of their European Parliament seats, even allowing for the fact that they had lost one some months earlier when Nessa Childers not only jumped party but then jumped constituency borders into Dublin and pulled off what was a surprise to some in that Euro constituency. Sinn Féin were among the big winners. They doubled their vote. They almost trebled their seats. They have 105 extra seats in city and county councils. But the real winners were that collection of independent and micro parties, more than 217, something 220 seats, depending how you count them, making them getting about 23-24% of the vote, and making them nearly as significant a bloc, if you see them as a bloc, as Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael. But I caution here, as I have before, that it is wrong to see the independents or smaller parties collectively as a bloc. It is also wrong to assume that they in some ways amount to an anti-establishment entity. Some of them are. Some of them are not. Literally, when you look at it, the micro-analysis constituency by constituency, the voters went into the polling booth and many of them just went looking for the independent and voted one for an independent of the right who might have been in Labour or Fine Gael or Fianna Fáil a month or two earlier, and then voted a left independent number 2. It was literally a decision among the electorate and none of the above decision when it came to the main parties. Many of us had predicted before the local and European elections that the electorate had set into a place where in or about half of the Irish voters were going to the polls to vote for anybody but the current shower. And what they meant by the current shower was Fine Gael, Labour and Fianna Fáil collectively. Now, those are the headline statistics. Then we have to take a deep breath and say, look at the immediate outcomes. Who would have thought 7, 8 weeks later, we have a new Taoiseach, we have a new leader of the Labour Party, we have 5 new ministers. We have the leader, Fianna Fáil, probably settled in his position now to the next general election, and the leader of Sinn Féin similarly settled, I think, in his position to the next general election. The most significant outcome, I think, of the general election, of the local and European elections, is that it is nearly impossible to imagine a statistical or numerical scenario, we'll see if any of the rest of the panel advance one, in which the current government could be re-elected with a majority after the next general election. It is almost impossible, in my view, to see a Fine Gael Labour government after the next election. And it is that, rather than any change in personalities at the top or otherwise, which is why the odds on the life of this government have shortened. There is every possibility they will survive, but if they do, it will be a much bumpier ride for the latter part of this coalition's term, as it might have been earlier. It's necessary, however, in dealing with Joe's question as to whether the landscape has utterly changed, to reflect on what the factors are that shaped that change in the local European elections. And the reality is, as I want to emphasise again, the factors which shaped the volatility at the 2011 general election in Ireland still persist and in some instances have intensified. Although there may be job growth, the overwhelming majority of those who were unemployed in 2011 are still unemployed in 2014 and are likely to be still unemployed in the election time in 2015 or 2016. The only difference being, whereas they were short-term unemployed in 2011, they will be long-term unemployed in 2015, 2016. That is a significant underlying economic and social factor which is playing, and inevitably is playing, into our political system. Secondly, I emphasise again the trauma and burden of private, mainly property-related debt, which households felt they were containing, households or small businesses felt they were containing, and managed to kick the can down the road on. Well, they've now caught up with the can. And that is crystallising, both in terms of the way the banks are dealing with it and otherwise, behind many middle class, lower middle class, in fact, doorways of all classes and demographics in this country. He or she are not telling each other how serious the financial situation is, such as the scare and trauma in those households. That is creating a large cohort of the Irish population who can't pay their mortgage consistently in recent years. And for the Irish who at times paid their mortgage before their taxes as the first call on their income, that in my view is having a significant social and economic destabilising effect. There is a growing cohort combined of unemployment, that kind of personal and property related debt, and the immigration hangover. There's a growing cohort of our population, or part of many voters, who no longer have the vested interest in our economy or our political stability, as it was assumed the Irish inherently had from their agrarian history and otherwise. If you live in that space, then the concept of gambling, as many economists would tell you, with the economic policies of Sinn Féin, or the political instability that might flow from a collection of independents and otherwise, well, for many voters the response is, well, sure, the system we have, or the shower we have just ain't working, then maybe we should try what's to be lost on something different. And that's an important part of the space. Another dimension of it is immigration, not the emigrants, because the reality of Irish political history has been emigrants don't feature in electoral outcomes because they're not here. That is the safety valve, the historical safety valve. That's in part why the Irish don't riot, because they're too young. They go and party otherwise in Australia or whatever. But those that are left behind by immigration of this generation are particularly mad as hell. And they're mad as hell because they dared to hope that this could be the first generation that could rear its children and grandchildren in close proximity to them. They're mad as hell because they struggle to put their children through third-level education available to this generation on a scale not available to others, and thought they could then have them around. And they resent the fact that they now have to play the role of Skype grandmothers or otherwise long-distance relationship with their own siblings, sons, friends, or grandchildren. And that, I think, is playing as well into the sense of anger and hurt in the Irish political psychic. Having enjoyed the boom, over-enjoyed perhaps, being offered the opportunity, being encouraged to avail of the opportunity to enjoy it, the psychological traumatic impact of the collapse, I think, is only now playing out in the Irish political system. Because of the stoicism of which Maurice Hayes spoke last week, that was contained for a period. It's not nobody was pro-austerity. The electorate in the main were prepared to endure the austerity with the view, with the hope, with the wish that they would emerge from it. And what happens last January? Well, David Murphy of RT warned here last summer that too much bunting at the time of the bailout could of itself be destabilising. Maurice put it even better last night. He said the hats were thrown in the air too soon. Expectation shift from Machiavelli to Glasnost, when expectations changes when instability arises. And that coincided just with the period coming up to the local European elections. People thought for the first time they could breathe. They could financially breathe. And all of a sudden their space and air to breathe was toxied by talk of water charges and property charges and uncertainties around those issues. Is it any wonder that the results were of the nature and the outcomes that they came? Together with those enduring social and economic factors, which I emphasise will endure and intensify before the next general election, are the general and generational patterns around politics. Peter Mayer spoke here before and has posthumously been published his definitive study of political parties across Europe. People are disengaging from identification with political parties. We see it here in Ireland. There isn't the Fianna Fáil or Fine Gael or Labour identities that there were before. People are not following the voting patterns of their generations. They're not even following a consistent voting pattern across their lives. Similarly, people are engaging in politics and political debate, or not engaging in politics and a political debate, in an entirely different way. We don't live in a 24-hour news cycle. We live in a 24-hour by 60-minute by 60-second news cycle. Look at your Twitter feed. It will have changed dramatically in the last 60 seconds. In that environment, in an environment that says in order to participate in politics, all you have to do is like a point of view or retweet it rather than organise protest or participate in around it, the nature and shape of political debate is different and is different. It's not necessarily any less authentic, but it is different, and our established political parties and systems are struggling to deal with and contain with it. So coming back to the Guards, the 400,000 type of votes, it seems to me we have a balkanisation of our politics, of our party system. You are going to have Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael, Sinn Féin as three political parties. I don't know. It's so volatile, it's too early to say whether they will be evenly matched or otherwise when the election the general election comes. Labour will struggle. If Labour loses half of its votes, it will be doing well. I think if anyone can pull it back from that brink, Joan Burton can. Fine Gael is going to lose votes. Again, the one person who could have an impact on that is the man who's going to be here tomorrow night. I would watch Leo the Line. Because there's a man who's been promoted at a very young age, notwithstanding the fact that he talks straight. That's liberating in Irish politics. And that's going to be liberating in Irish politics. Watch that take shape over the next 2 years, or in the vortex after the next election, when and how it comes. It seems to me, however, that the most likely outcome of the next general election, and I put all those warnings I've put about the volatility of our system, but the most likely outcome after the next general election is the Fianna Fáil government. Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil government. And if that's the conclusion, to the extent you can say there's a collective conclusion from the results of an election of the electors, then the politicians of both those parties will just have to get on with it. The voters won't thank them for coming back and ask the question again. They'll just have to get on with it. Because any voter in Ireland, particularly in their 40s or 50s, will have voted for Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil at different points across the last 20 years. They don't see that distinction. Now, that scenario raises two potentials. The concept of a Fianna Fáil, Fine Gael government, Fine Gael, Fianna Fáil government more likely, Fine Gael being the bigger of them, is something that was often been referred to in the last couple of years as a national necessity, some kind of national coalition government. Now it will rise as an electoral necessity for the parties themselves. And it could go one of two ways. It could be a genuinely reforming government with the type of majority to do whatever it wants if it decides to do the transformative reforming things in our politics, in our economy, and in our administrative system. It really could be the best of both. There's a real risk, however, that it could be the worst of both, and it could be a deeply conservative dead weight on top of the political system. I think the debate both those parties should be having over the next couple of years. Stephen and others will want to have a different debate and debate the other side of that matrix, but those two parties should be having over the next 2 years is which of those type of governments, not whether they're going to be in government after the next election, but which of those type of governments they can be. I'm inspired by the tone set here by Joe with a mix of politics and poetry this week to compose the following two lines on the theme of whether our politics has changed utterly. All has changed feck all. A new politics, it seems, is stillborn.